From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's a between-season special on Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Finite time, infinite choices.
A replay of Melissa's conversation with Elizabeth, host and founder of the Incognito Society YouTube channel. Remember, if you've got a tip for Melissa on anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, totally relaxing on her week off by completely rebuilding every one of the kitchen cabinets, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. I'm not exactly rebuilding the kitchen cabinets.
Oh, well, you kind of are.
All right, so...
But it's great. I'm not complaining.
No, you're not, because I'm doing it.
Oh, my God.
Full disclosure, I went to 4 different Aldis to get cabinet sliding baskets.
Yes, she did. She became a monster, a shopping monster.
These old cabinets, that's my new show on HGTV or the DIY or whatever. It's these old cabinets.
These old cabinets.
Our house is, was built in 1988, and original cabinets. They've been repainted by the previous owners, beautifully restored. But they're old, and they're we need more convenient storage.
Yeah.
And we're old, and we don't like to bend over. So
I am anyway.
Mark's old and doesn't like to bend over. So I found these slide. You know how every couple has their shit. Like, I hate when I come downstairs and on the kitchen counter is a clean, large mixing bowl that I put away because Mark won't bend over and put it away. And Mark hates when I leave a bowl in the sink with water in it instead of to rinse it out, as opposed to putting it right in the dishwasher. So apparently most of our fights break down to bowls.
Yeah, bowls. Well, dishes. Dishes
in general. Anyway.
Yeah.
So Aldi in their aisle of shame this week had these cabinet slides, and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to buy 2 and try it. If I don't like it, I can return them. And I installed them, and I was like, these are magical, and they make our lives so much better.
And I actually had that same reaction.
Yeah.
One of the rare times when I saw them, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, we were both orgasmic over sliding cabinet slides to put your pots and pans in. They have one that's also a lid organizer, and that one was pretty cool too. So I went back and got a lid organizer, and then I went back and got 2 more, and then I believe subsequently I went back and got 6 more.
Yeah, we
including 2 trips to Burbank yesterday. But let's not talk about that.
Okay.
So let's just say all of our shit's all organized. Our pantry looks good. Our cans and jars look good. Our baking supplies look good. Our pots and pans and lids look good. And our coffee bar in the little hallway butler's pantry, we have our Keurig and our Nespresso, and underneath you can just pull out these slide. They just slide. I sound like Carol Burnett when they were playing Sorry. Slide. I just slide the little things out, and it's magical. And I feel like I have upped the value of our home by $10,000.
I think so.
It was under $200, and that's the other thing, tipsters. I went to many Aldis because some of them had sold out, and they were $19.99 for the entire slide in the basket. And producer Mark's like, oh, we'll find them somewhere else. Yeah. At Lowe's, they were $55 or $58.
Yeah.
And on Amazon, they were $64. So 3 times the price. And can I just say, the exact same product. The exact same product.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
So yeah, that's what when I said we were taking a week off, it has turned out to not be a week off. I'm up to it's a lot. So,
well, you need to find projects, I think. I don't think you can just relax.
No, I don't mean that. I have had many phone calls and interviews and things happening with the podcast. So that's the issue. I'm not really taking time off. It was, and we didn't know this was going to happen. And sometimes a gift falls in your lap, and that gift is an email from Elizabeth, the host of the Incognito Society. So what happened was Elizabeth emailed me a few weeks ago about the Tom Biedenharn case, because Elizabeth hosts, she is a YouTube channel creator, and her channel is called the Incognito Society. And while she does focus on different cases from Indiana, a lot of the people in her group are focused on the Delphi case, which is completely understandable. But she had wanted to cover Tom Biedenharn's case because she is just, an hour or two north of where Tom lived. And we talked about that case and some other cases in Indiana. So we just sort of hit it off, and I love what she's doing. And I'm so not a YouTube person, as most of you know. Our YouTube channel is hardly a channel. It's our logo and the audio. And one of the things I found interesting about the Incognito Society is that Elizabeth is obviously a much more tech-savvy person than I am, even though she says she's not. But, she puts up slides and information, visual information. She uses, an avatar for herself, which I understand completely. A lot of hosts want to protect their identity and their privacy. I'm just a ridiculous person who lives out loud, and I have no perception of privacy anymore. I just figure if someone wants to find me, they will. So I might as well just tell them where I am, make it easier for them. I don't care. Everything's going to be fine. No one's going to kill me unless it's Mark. And then please just look at him, because I think...
come on.
I'm kidding. It's probably Siren.
That I could understand.
Yeah, probably, and just killing me with dog kisses. So yeah, I don't hide my name or anything like that. But I love the fact that she has this group of warriors who want to solve the Delphi case, which is, understandable. Living in Indiana, such a terrible case. All of the information they have, it's still unsolved. Heartbreaking in so many ways. But it was just such a lovely conversation. And we were going to talk about the Tom case. And then a day or two later, Elizabeth messaged me and said, well, why don't we just make the episode about you and your podcast? I'm like, why? Why would anyone want to hear that bullshit? And she felt like her viewers, her listeners, her group needed a little kick in the butt to get more engaged. And I don't know that they did, but I think maybe just hearing a different...
Oh, I think they did. I think I think they did.
Well, maybe just hearing a different version. And I do understand that listeners, viewers kind of break down into two different forms. Some people absolutely love podcasts. Some people absolutely love YouTube videos and channels. Some people are in the middle and can do both. I'm really a podcast girl, only because I'm much more auditory than visual. I will be honest, the only true crime, videos I've watched have typically been about the Delphi case, because there are so many citizen sleuths and armchair detectives in Indiana that have...
And a video is at the center of that entire case, too.
Exactly. They have, they have a lot, and yet somehow they have nothing. But we are both hopeful that case is infinitely solvable, and we really hope that will happen. But it was a lovely thing talking to someone else with a different perspective who does things in a different way. And it was a really eye-opening and interesting gift to me. And she was just so gracious to let me take time on her YouTube channel. And we thought it would be a lovely thing to do a crossover. So we're going to play the audio from that interview with the Incognito Society. And we, really enjoyed it so much. So it made me think of things in a different way. And she's doing great work. And when I said it at the beginning in the intro, finite time and infinite choices, I get that. We all have finite time and infinite choices on things to listen to and watch. But, the things that are important to you, I hope that in this new year of 2021, you make the choices that make you happy, that interest you. And the fact that people take the time to listen to our podcast or to watch YouTube channels on true crime is a beautiful gift. You have infinite choices. When I started this podcast, there were 400,000 podcasts available, and I thought that was overwhelming. And 3 years later, there are 1.7 million podcasts to choose from. And I have my theory that 1.6 million of them are true crime, but I know that's wrong. But I I heard the term finite time and infinite choices from Tim Ferriss, who hosts a podcast not about true crime, and I thought it was such a beautiful way. It's a modern way of saying at the end of your flight on Delta Airlines, we know you have lots of choices. We thank you for flying Delta. So it's a different way of saying that, and we know you have infinite choices, and we thank you for flying just the Tip-Sters. And here's our conversation with the Incognito Society.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hello, Watcher on the Wall and Miss Gail on the Trail Kim. Well, we're going to get right into it today. I have a very special guest. This is Melissa Morgan from Just the Tip-Sters podcast. And before I bring her on to start talking about what she does, I wanted to give a little bit of background about how her and I even came in contact with each other. I had come across a case I'd never heard of before. And it was on Facebook. Facebook page is Who Killed Big Tom? Well, I had never heard of that. Found out it was a case that happened 2 years ago, about an hour from me. As I started reading about it and researching, I came across Just the Tip-Sters podcast. Of course, I listened. It was about Tom's case. And I reached out to Melissa. And she emailed me back. Sweetest gal ever. Started talking to me just as if her and I had known each other forever. We've talked on the phone. We've texted. I've brought her to the dark side on the YouTube. Let me tell you, she is a full-fledged podcaster. Doesn't want anything to do with YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please make welcome to the show my friend Melissa Morgan. Hi.
Hello, Elizabeth and the Incognito Society.
Thank you for being here.
It is my pleasure.
I am so grateful to you and your husband, producer, for taking the time out of your day to be here on this channel talking about true crime.
It's my pleasure, and you're opening my eyes, because YouTube to me is makeup tutorials and Dollar Tree hauls. So
I love
occasionally, honestly, the only things I've looked at in the true crime world are your channel and a few other channels about local Indiana cases, which we can talk about. But yeah. Yeah, you were opening my eyes. We have Just the Tipsters has a YouTube channel, but I don't get you kids in your YouTubies. We just have the banner up and the audio from the episodes. So it's probably the most boring YouTube channel ever. And I would be much too chicken to do a YouTube live like you do and other podcast and creators do. It's an amazing world to me.
Well, I'm just the opposite. I tried the podcasting world, 3 episodes, and I was out. I'm like, I can't do this.
I love your episodes, and I listened to all of them right in a row because they're not very long. You have a beautiful voice, and it's all about the voice for me. I mean, the content obviously too, but the content can sometimes get, a little lost if the voice isn't good at presenting it. And you have a beautiful voice and a beautiful way of presenting the cases that you were interested in talking about on your episodes. I love your podcast, but you do you, boo.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, but I'm like, I'm going back to the live where I have some people in chat that I can converse with, at least from one aspect or another. And so I felt like I'm bringing you to the dark side.
A little bit. Yeah. A little bit.
To tell you a little bit about Melissa, I'm sorry, I almost called you Morgan.
That's okay. It's like we're on a ball team. You can call me. That's on the back of my jersey.
I know, I'm a little nervous, so bear with me here. Once I started talking to her about Tom's case, it opened up a whole can of worms, if you will. She has done so much more with her podcast. And I'm like, this show doesn't need to be about one case. This show needs to be about you. and what all you have done. And please help us in the YouTube world of true crime, because we need you.
Oh, you don't? No.
I do. We do. We do. We need your straight shooting attitude. What you bring to your podcast is a no fuss, no mess kind of a girl. We need that.
I don't have much of a filter. That is going to be apparent to your people in the society. They're going to figure out pretty quickly.
That's okay.
I don't have a filter, but I
told
so
you
honored.
to be you.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the case. It was such a tough case for me, and you were like, I don't know if I can, do it justice. And I'm like, girl, no one can. It's pretty buttoned up, but I would never, say don't do it. I think every case needs light shown on it from any direction. Light on it is a good thing, and that case is just so tough. But there are so many cases in Indiana that are so fascinating, and I honestly feel like Indiana has a group of people in the YouTube world and in other parts of the investigation world that are fascinating. It's such a fascinating thing to me. Growing up in Kentucky, I just I thought of Indiana as this beautiful state that was very opposite of Kentucky. Kentucky's full of hills, and Indiana's kind of flat, but it's, we're like cousins because we're connected. And, it's just, I was blown away when I found the number of YouTube channels about true crime cases in Indiana. I was blown away.
It's amazing. I had wrote down all the cases that are cold cases that are unsolved in Indiana, and it's well over 100.
Wow.
And there's the ones that you and I talked about, which we'll get into a little bit if you want.
Sure.
Diane Sherman Young and Brenda, is it Ginter?
Ginter, yes.
They're not on those cold cases.
I know.
And it's mind-blowing.
It is.
And then here's this Tom Biedenharn, who I'd never heard of. I live an hour from where it took place, never heard of it.
Wow.
The amount of crimes in Indiana is mind-blowing.
It is. It is. I think of it as this idyllic place, and in some ways it still is. But it's the world gets a little more advanced and a little darker as time goes on, and it is overwhelming sometimes, the number of cases that come out of a state like Indiana. I am blown away too.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to talk more about you, and if you don't mind, can I ask you how long you've been a podcaster?
Absolutely. I started, it's the third anniversary, I guess, probably close to right about now. We started in January of 2018. So yeah, 2018, 2019, 2020, all three years. We didn't really miss a week. We've taken this week off. That's why it's nice to talk to you, but we do way over 55 to 60 episodes a year. We do one a week, but we do a couple of, I call them murder-tizers, if someone doesn't get offended by that. It's like an appetizer of murder. It's a smaller episode that wouldn't necessarily be, like a full episode, but there's smaller things that have interested me a lot that I thought needed attention and didn't want to maybe add on to a full episode. So yeah, we do a couple of murder-tizers a year.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Murder-tizers. I like your little things that you come up with.
Yeah.
Explain cowbell to me.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So you're too young to remember this, but there was a band called the Blue Oyster Cult, and they had a song called "Don't Fear the Reaper," and I wanted that to be our theme song. And my husband has a history in the music industry, and he goes, it's not going to be that expensive. We can reach out to the publisher and pay how much X amount of dollars for the rights. And I was like, I had the whole thing in my head, how I saw it, how I heard it, more of almost like a radio show. So I was like, I want to use Don't Fear the Reaper is the absolutely perfect theme song to a true crime podcast. And we were going to do it, but the platform that hosts our podcast, Libsyn, which stands for Liberated Syndication, they were like, no, don't do it. You can't do it. It doesn't matter if you get the rights. We won't let you do it. They were just nuts. So it was like, okay. So we went to a PodSafe site that has musicians that offer their compositions. You pay a fee, a very small flat fee, and you can use that music in perpetuity. Now someone else can use it, and you hope they don't, but you pay this, this licensing fee to this composer. So I went through many, many pages of music until I found this one that has a cowbell in it. And I was like, okay, that's because all I wanted to say was more cowbell. And that's also from a Saturday Night Live sketch with Will Ferrell and Christopher Walken, where he plays the producer of Blue Oyster Cult trying to record Don't Fear the Reaper. And, the musicians are playing, and he's like, I need more cowbell. And Will Ferrell is the guy just banging on a goddamn cowbell with a drumstick.
Gotcha.
Like it makes the entire song. So that's the long background to more cowbell.
It's hilarious. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, the entertainment aspect of true crime is something that I'm always trying to find that happy medium.
It is. It is. You got to do that. It's like walking a tightrope. You're right.
Yeah. And in one of your episodes, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen of the episode that you're talking about, or that I would like for you to talk about. And it's called, the title of it is 148, Smells Like Rotten Excusers and Time Crime Abusers.
Yeah.
And, you talk about, as a true crime podcaster, and I'm a true crime YouTuber, how do we find that happy medium without making it sensationalized? How do you do it?
That is the most important and intelligent question that anyone who either wants to do this or listens to this has to ask and answer for themselves. There are absolutely interesting, popular podcasts that are mostly comedy. They take nothing seriously, the victims' family members, and definitely not the perpetrators. But there are those that also don't find that respectful. You can find what you like. That's why there's 31 flavors. Some people like vanilla, some people like Rocky Road. But I try very hard, and sometimes I fail, and I try mostly to succeed, to make sure that anything I'm making fun of, a lot of it is myself, but what I'm making fun of would be the perpetrator if I am making fun of something. And there are a lot of episodes where there's really nothing funny, but I try to never make fun of the victim, because that's, they can't come back and say, that really hurt my feelings, or that you're right, that was funny. They don't have a chance to rebut that. So I do try. And when people notice and say, you're always respectful of the victims, that is priceless to me. That means more to me than I can say, because I do want to be respectful of the victims. That's
my biggest thing on YouTube is, especially you and I talked about the Delphi case. I don't allow that. There's so much crazy surrounding that case. The last thing I want people to do is go after the families of those victims. And so that's where I draw the line. Otherwise, it's pretty much free to discuss. Yeah, you do host a very, open forum, but you are respectful. And I would like to think I'm one of those people that thinks that, man is inherently good as opposed to evil. I think man is much more inherently good than evil. But I think that people sometimes go after victims' family members, or even victim blame, simply out of fear, because they want the case to be solved. If they point a finger in many directions, and including the ones that are, not pointed in the right way, it's because something as terrible as taking another person's life is still an anomaly. It hopefully doesn't happen to us. It hopefully doesn't happen to anyone we love or a family member. But when it does, it's still so shocking. And people want the answer. They just want the answer. They want what I wanted when I started
the podcast in January of 2018, I never, ever saw myself covering cases that were unsolved or a missing person. I only wanted cases that were solved because I couldn't stand the not having everything wrapped up with a bow around it.
Yeah.
I really wanted that. That gave me some sort of peace that, okay, this terrible thing happened, and yet, you know, it's been solved. The person who did it, you know, there is some sort of retribution, and yeah. So I never thought I would be, you know, covering cases that were unsolved or someone was missing. And it just so happened the listeners just kept saying, please, would you cover this? And then family members would reach out and say, would you please cover this? And, you know.
And look at you now.
Yeah.
Look at you now, because you have done so much good.
Aw.
And I want you to talk about it. I want you to take this time to tell about the cases that actually, like for instance, was it the Stevenson case that you actually had helped, you know, giving the light on your podcast? the detectives or investigators actually released more information. Is that true?
Yes. That's
amazing.
Well, it's a gift that I got the ear of, and it started off rocky. I'll tell you, a few people I went to school with suggested that I contact the Boone County Sheriff's Department in Boone County, Kentucky, who are the leads on the Stevenson case. And I was like, oh, this happened in 2011, and I have been out of the area for a very long time. I didn't, you know anything about the case. And I contacted the Boone County. I always try to go the right route. I start in the right route, and if I don't get anyone to answer me, I'm like, fuck it, I'll find it out somehow. And I contacted the public information officer, and I will be honest with you, there really hasn't been a public information officer I've ever met that I like. It's almost like wallpaper. I haven't met a wallpaper I like, and I haven't met a public information officer I like. And I've said to my husband, who's the producer of my podcast, why don't they just call them public disinformation officer or public no information officer? Because they just fucking give no information, and that's their job. That's their job. It just. So I contacted the PIO, the public information officer for the Boone County Sheriff's Department, and he said, well, you aren't the first podcaster to contact us, and you won't be the last. And we don't, blah-de-de-blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. No harm, no foul. I was asked to cover this case, and if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And then something happened, and he emailed me back and was like, no, wait, I was like, hey, bye-bye, no, I don't care. And he's like, no, it's okay. And then he handed me over to the detective who has had the case since minute one, which is a rarity. He's had it the entire time. And he is a gem. I just had someone refer to him today as a ninja. He is involved in so many cases, not only in Kentucky, but he is, has his hand in cases in Indiana and cases in Ohio and probably cases in other states I don't know about because he does keep things close to the vest. But he was so open and honest about the case that is, he bases his whole career on it, and he's got a long career. And he said, the minute this case is solved, I'm retiring. And I'm like, okay. And like, he's staying on to solve the Stevenson case. It's that important to him. And those are the detectives you want on any case.
Exactly.
Those are the guys that you'd never want to retire, but that, you want. That's so funny. Someone named Cold Truth said, Boone County has a PIO. Cold Truth, they have two. And
wow.
Yeah, they have two. And they're nice men once shit gets settled. Once they unleash their crack, things get better. And they are, kind men. And Yeah. Oh, whoever Avalon Apples is. Yeah. Detective Cox is the detective that we're talking about. And he is a ninja. He is an amazing dude. And he came on and was so open and forthcoming and so real and authentic because this case means so much to him. And the family members, the Stevenson kids, have been so open and wonderful. And something happened after the podcast aired in August that someone contacted them with what they call unique information, meaning something that only the perpetrator would know.
Oh, wow.
So they are still running that down. I don't know if it will, unfold into anything like an arrest, but whatever it was, they allowed me to go on local television, and the case was covered by all of the major news networks in Cincinnati. And because of that, they WKRC, which is Channel 12, I think they call it Local 12. It's the CBS affiliate in Cincinnati.
Yes.
I go on once a month to discuss a local cold case. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Well, I have that clip. Do you want me to play that now or maybe after we talk?
Anytime you want. You have the one about the Stevenson case, or?
I'm pretty sure I do. Let me not lie
sure.
about it.
You can play it whenever you'd like.
Let me.
What? You've done such great research. Yeah.
Years now since a shocking crime took the lives of a Florence couple. 74-year-olds Bill and Peggy Stevenson were stabbed and bludgeoned 9 years ago. Now detectives say a podcast and a $50,000 reward are generating new leads in the case. That podcast is called Just the Tip-Sters, and it's hosted by a Northern Kentucky native who now lives in California. Melissa Morgan is with us this morning via Zoom. Melissa,
There
so
she
good to
is.
see you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila.
So, Melissa, I listened to the show yesterday that you did with Detective Coy Cox of Boone County, and I didn't realize that so many people thought this case was solved, including you, right?
Absolutely. I just assumed if there's one murderer in a family that was the person responsible, and boy, was I wrong.
Right, because they had a nephew who was found guilty of another murder in Indiana, but the detectives in Boone County don't think he killed Bill and Peggy, right?
Well, as Detective Cox has trained me so well, I will say no one's ever eliminated, including myself. But yes, I believe he's able to be put on the back burner, and they need to focus on other suspects.
Right. They didn't find any of his DNA at the crime scene. Before we get back to the case, though, I would just like to know, Melissa, how do you choose the cases to profile on your show? You've done so many.
That's such a great question. I get a lot of submissions, people asking me to cover specific cases, and it really is something that just kind of has to grab me. There are absolutely so many podcasts available, and most of them true crime. So you can have your case submitted to so many different places, and maybe my podcast isn't right for a specific case, but when I get one that I know I got to cover, you feel it in your gut.
Yeah. Was there something about being from Northern Kentucky yourself that made this sort of feel close to you?
It did. Some friends that I went to high school with mentioned the case was still unsolved, and I was a little shocked. I thought for sure that had been already closed, and it really just stuck with me. And then, ironically, 6 weeks later, the day I picked up the phone to call the Boone County Sheriff's Office was the anniversary of the date of their murder.
Wow.
So I think some things happen for a reason. I think that was a reason that I needed to cover this one.
Well, one of the things that I found really fascinating in listening to your chat with Detective Cox was what happened in the Stevensons' home after they were murdered. I had not heard that before. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's another reason that this case is so fascinating is because of the odd circumstances. As Detective Cox always says, there's not a crime scene. It was a staged scene so that the killer or killers wanted us to think it was a certain thing and may or may not have been, or something very different. It was just to confuse investigators, and I think they did a good job for a while, but I think that's coming to an end, and the confusion's going to be wrapped up, because I am overwhelmed with how amazing the Boone County Sheriff's Department is, and their unwillingness to let this case ever get cold.
Yeah,
I know
that they have worked this case that entire 9 years. They didn't ever stop working it and following leads. But what do you know about the leads your show has generated?
I wish I could tell you, but Detective Cox tells me nothing. So
really?
all I know is I got a call a few days before the press release came out and that the family decided to attach the $50,000 reward. And he said, what you don't know that is going on behind the scenes is we've received some tips. Some of them have information that is unique and had never been released to the public.
Oh, wow.
So that was a pretty big day.
Yeah. Have you had a show that resulted directly in a crime being solved, Melissa?
I would love to say yes, but podcasts don't solve crimes.
I love
Law
that.
enforcement solves crimes. What we can do is shine the light on a case that may have been fallen between the cracks or may have been pushed on a back burner. That's what we can do. I will tell you, a week before I heard from Detective Cox, a case that's local to me and one of the reasons I started the podcast resulted in an arrest. And I wouldn't say the podcast had a direct result on that, but I can tell you I whined and cried hard enough to the LA County Sheriff's Department cold case unit, and I guess they listened.
Literally.
And it's been a great couple weeks, I can tell you that.
That's awesome.
What made you get into this? You don't have a law enforcement background yourself, Melissa.
I do not. I think there's a lot of weird kids out there like me. I mean, I'm not a kid, but as a kid, fascinated by true crime. Way too young to have read Helter Skelter, and yet I did.
Oh.
And since then, I've wanted to, in my heart, get the bad guy. I just feel like there's no reason to take another person's life unless it's in self-defense. And if you do, you need to be caught.
Mm-hmm.
Well, keep up the good work, Melissa. You have a new fan in me. I'm sure the detectives all appreciate it too. Yeah. And if you want to read about the Stevenson case or call in a tip to Melissa and her show, all you have to do is click on this story on local12.com. Best of luck. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you, Sheila.
Well, she took all of my questions, but
I bet not all of them.
what a great interview that you two did there, and really just opened up everything that I wanted answered for everyone here tonight, is how you got into it, and the cases that you've directly helped. And do you want to elaborate anything on the one about the arrest?
I would be delighted to, but I'm going to revert to what I said there, which is that podcasts don't solve cases. I know there are a lot of podcasts that have kind of put that out, that they've helped solve cases, and they really haven't. What they have is put out the information, and law enforcement or other people that call in, tipsters, just the tipsters isn't just a 12-year-old boy dick joke. We actually do get tips, and we ask that people call in tips to, the appropriate channels such as law enforcement. So we don't solve cases, but I am a bit of a nosy ass, and I might dig in a little deeper than some, and sometimes it will turn around and bite me in the ass, and sometimes it keeps me up at night, and sometimes it brings me some peace. And what happened was one of the reasons I started in January of 2018 was that in January of 2017, a man went missing in my area, and he is one of the real inspirations for this because his wife is living my nightmare. January 26th of 2017, Linda Sarazan came home from work. She is an accountant at NBC Universal, has been for 20-something years, and her husband worked 30 hours a week at a local theme park, Magic Mountain. We have a Magic Mountain, Six Flags Magic Mountain here in Southern California, and he worked in the gift shop. And he was at home, and she had called him at 4:30 p.m., and because he wasn't working as much, he was happy to make dinner. And she said, I'm going to work an hour of overtime. And he said, oh, great. We're having chicken, and I'll just put the potatoes in a little later. And she was like, great. She called at 6:30, and this time he didn't answer. And she said, I'm on my way home. And she got home at 7:30, and he's not there. And his keys, his wallet, his phone, his jacket, his car are all there, and he is not.
And she picks up his phone and sees the last person that he has spoken to on his phone is their nephew, Daniel. And she calls Daniel and says, Daniel, it's Aunt Linda calling you from Uncle Will's phone. Have you seen him? No, haven't seen him. Did you see him? Did you see him today? Well, yeah, I was there earlier. Oh, okay. What time did you leave? About 1:30. Oh, okay. And 2 days later, the neighbors across the street said, hey, you know what? We have a camera aimed at your driveway. Would you like to see the footage? Why, yes. Yes, we would.
Oh, God.
At 5:06, Daniel backed his unique SUV into the driveway, opened the back hatch, which we can't see. At 5:12, the hatch closes and he peels out of the driveway, going in the opposite direction of his home. So lie number one, he didn't leave at 1:30. He was there all day. Will's blood's in the back of his SUV. Any attorney worth their salt would say Will had a nosebleed or cut himself fishing. Well, you can tell the difference between blood from your nose, which, has synovial fluid from your spine, as opposed to, potentially your nephew bludgeoning the fucking shit out of you and shoving you in the back of his SUV.
Right.
So he was, spoken to the next day when Will did not show up. And here is where what you do and what the people who speak to you on your channel and who chat with you, what they all need to do. And sometimes you need someone who goes down to the sheriff's office and pounds on the counter and says, pay attention to me, because a deputy showed up to their house on Thursday night when Will wasn't home and said, yeah, you're right, he's not here. And the next day he was still not there. And Linda, who's tiny, shows up and pounds on the counter and says, come to my house now. And they come to her house and find blood spatter behind his recliner, which they hadn't seen the night before because nobody gave a shit. And yeah, they even looked in the attic. It's like, he walked away. No, he didn't walk away from his life. One detective said maybe he's in Costa Rica. Yeah, that happened. He's been married 28 years. They have no kids. They treated their nephew like their own son. They have the best life, and I call them an island of two. They're this couple that they are each other's lives. He didn't walk away, and he didn't go to Costa Rica, and he didn't start over. His nephew killed him and hid his body somewhere. And unfortunately, Will's brother, Chuck, who is Daniel's father, Daniel lied, and Chuck swore to it. And Chuck said, oh, he was home when I got home from work at 4:30.
No.
So that 2 days later, it's then shown, well, no, he wasn't home at 4:30. He was backing into the, his uncle's driveway at 5:06 to retrieve his body. So yeah, there's a whole lot of layers to this, but let me just tell you, I, who do not like the out of doors, volunteered to go with searchers because we live in an area that's very canyonous and, it's the low desert here in Southern California, and there's a lot of places where you can hide someone. And I don't like trees and rocks and bugs. And I show up the first day wearing a pair of Ugg boots, just completely not, prepared. But
right.
I was told to get a piece of PVC pipe to push, bushes out of the way and to look for rattlesnakes. And, I spent 3 months with the searchers looking all over for Will, and we still don't know where he is. We don't know where his body is. And a nobody case is more difficult for sure. But cutting to the chase, what I can tell you happened is time went on and the lead detective in Will's case got diverted to another high profile case. And who's gonna care about a 58-year-old man who's missing when, you have to look into the Natalie Wood case as if anyone needs to. Anyway, so
right.
Yeah, so things fall between the cracks, right? We happen to have law enforcement and people in the legal field who listen to the podcast and who like it. And in February of 2020, a veteran cold case detective who listens to the podcast asked if my husband and I would like a tour of the LA County Sheriff's Department Homicide Bureau because it's the largest homicide bureau in the country. And I was like, of course. And it was a great day, Elizabeth. We had an amazing time, and he showed us everything. And we were literally standing in the cold case room, which is a huge warehouse and kept cold. We were standing in there, and
Why?
I just happened to say offhandedly, hey, is Detective Blank here today? And he was like, you know him? And I said, well, I don't know him, but he's in charge of the case that got me started on the podcast, and I think he's let it fall between the cracks. And he said, do you want me to take a look at it? And I burst into tears. And so much so that he's such a gentleman, he has hankies, which I hadn't seen since my grandfather was alive.
Yeah.
He handed me his hanky, and I said, I just want you to know I use waterproof mascara, so don't think your wife will be upset when I wipe my face off on your hanky. And he goes, oh, that's good, because I don't need to come home with that. So I'll be damned if a week later they didn't show up at Will and Linda's house. 6 forensic specialists show up at Will and Linda's house and spend the day looking for more evidence. It's 3 years later, and I'm pissed off, but they did it. And
Yeah.
I text, and here's that thin blue line. I text my favorite detective and said, I don't know what the fuck you did, but thank you. And he said, now wait a minute. They were working hard on that case, and I just sat down with the team and said, she's right. It's solvable the way it is. Take a look at it. And you know what I said? Bullshit. They didn't do shit after a while, and you kicked their ass and took their names. And he did. And I'll be damned if July 31st of this year, they didn't arrest Daniel Sarazan for the murder of his uncle, even though we still don't know where his body is.
That is crazy. 3 years.
3 years later.
And they had him on surveillance and everything.
Well, yes and no. Yes, but they're like, it could be someone else. Sure. Yeah. So he had his first preliminary hearing in November, which of course was just a postponement because he ran out of money for his attorney and has a court-appointed attorney. And his second one was in November, and I attended that one. And the next one is in January 21st. I'm going to be there for that one too. So it was interesting seeing him stand there in person with a mask on, but I feel like it's a good thing to be, supportive of the family. So,
I mean, how many podcasters would go and ask a detective to do that 3 years later, to go back and they actually do it?
Well, I honestly didn't ask. I wanted to kick the detective in the ass who I felt wasn't doing anything. And the sweet, kind, cold case detective said, just offhandedly, do you want me to take a look at it? And when I burst into tears, he goes, this one's important to you, isn't it? I'm like, yes, it is.
I think if more people did that, maybe we'd get some action.
That's what I'm saying. I think law enforcement is overtaxed, understaffed. They want, I do believe in my heart, are there bad cops? Abso-fucking-lutely. Are there bad doctors? Abso-fucking-lutely. Are there bad plumbers? Yes. But for the most part, people who sign up for a life in law enforcement want to be in it to do good. But you get overwhelmed and you have too many cases and shit falls by the wayside. They are humans. And sometimes you need to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, buddy, can you please take a look at this one again?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it resulted in an arrest, finally.
Yeah.
That's good for you.
But you know how the legal system is. We can keep our fingers crossed that he makes it through the system and that it goes the way it goes. I will tell you, I am hopeful because the preliminary hearing in November, the DA assigned to this case is amazing. She is an ass kicker, and she didn't let 1 second in that preliminary hearing go without her opinion being stated, and the court-appointed defense attorney was out of his league. In fact, so much so
that the judge, after a few minutes of sparring back and forth, the judge said, okay, we're going to take this to my chambers. So they got up and left, and we're all just sitting there like, what's happening? And they come back 20 minutes later, and it's like, okay, we'll see you on January 21st.
Wow.
It was really interesting seeing the way the law works in person. I can watch all the episodes of Law and Order SVU that I want, but seeing justice in person was awe-inspiring.
Oh, I bet. Man, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
In that, holy cow.
Yeah.
My gosh. Well, Melissa, I want to ask you about Tom's case, but I want to say once again, with that case, that's an amazing step forward for somebody in, whether it be a podcaster or a YouTuber, to help such a case. So,
but I think that's what YouTubers and podcasters do or want to do. And again, I'm so impressed with all of the YouTube channels that came out of Indiana, especially for the Delphi case, but for other cases. I mean, I don't know if there are YouTube channels that are so representative of a state any more than Indiana. It's amazing. And maybe it was Delphi that sort of broke people open. But the fact that people want to talk about it, that they want to be so interactive, that's the shit that gets stuff done.
Well, let's just put Tom on the back burner for 1 second.
Sure. Absolutely.
I know that there's probably people in the chat just chomping to ask you. Okay. And there was a lot in the Stevenson case that just really kind of gave me the feels about Delphi.
Sure.
And it's... Okay, let me just start with, you and I have talked before, but the one thing that stood out to me the most was you said Indiana is the hardest.
Ugh.
Do you want to go there?
Girl. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's fine. It's the worst.
Please elaborate.
I'm sure some of your the Incognito Society know what the fuck I'm talking about, and I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, there's YouTubers that have that have their own channel in my chat right now.
Okay.
And they are going to feel you on this. I hear,
Oh,
so.
I am fully willing to say my opinion. It started with Brenda Ginter. The Brenda Ginter case is like 1976, so I get it. It's old. And when you mentioned that Brenda Ginter and Diane Sherman Young are not on the unsolved list from Indiana State Police, I get it. It bothers me, but I get it. So I tried for 6 months to get information on Brenda Ginter. And I will be honest with you, that was because of a friend who was born and raised in Indiana and lives in California now, and he was a child. When this happened, he said, my mom babysat Brenda Ginter's infant, and I knew about the case, and she was strangled in her apartment. They left the baby. She was strangled with the cord of a lamp, and they left the baby there, and a neighbor called for a welfare check because they thought something was wrong with the baby, and the baby was there alone for a day and a half or 2 days because Brenda was murdered. And 2 people were arrested, and 2 people were released 6 months later, and nothing else has ever been done. So I called about that case and got bullshit, nothing, not even a call back, go fuck yourself, turn green, nothing. So I was like, all right, I kind of gave up, which is, if you're me, you shouldn't do that, but I did. The next one was Diane Sherman Young, who was, her case was first classified suicide as she was shot in her car and then it was set fire to in a field.
Yeah,
it happens all the time that people set fire to themselves and then shoot themselves. It happens all the time. It was the first case in Indiana history that had a coroner's inquest in 50 years. And the coroner's inquest is fascinating. And what happened there was I called the PIO of the Porter County Sheriff's Office and was, oh, shucks, ma'am, go fuck yourself. So got nothing. Really, really bad.
I was told by a couple of people, oh, you know what? The chief will call you back. No, he won't. No one will ever call me back. Go fuck yourself. And do you know who is remarkably helpful in Indiana? Medical examiners. The coroner's offices of several counties in Indiana have been priceless to
Except
me.
for Carroll County. Carroll County's out.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, the coroner's office in Porter County found the coroner's inquest, which they didn't even have a copy of in their files. She went to the library and found it. It was placed in the genealogical area of the library because Diane Sherman Young's family wanted it to be there for everyone in the public to read. She found it for me, copied the 180-something pages, and sent it to me. Amazing, amazing people. I mean, the medical examiner's offices have been nothing but phenomenal. So now we get to Tom. I didn't want to take this case. I shouldn't have taken this case. I didn't listen to myself, and I took the case because the family member reached out to me, and I am a sucker. And I thought, just do it. Just swallow what your doubts about this and do it. And my husband, it took 2 months of me just wanting to cry every day. My husband said he had walked past my office and I had invented new curse words. He said I sounded like Yosemite Sam. Fucking. Yeah. So I invented new curse words, and I contacted the Indiana State Police, and they were extraordinarily withholding, and they have a PIO. I do have to say the Indiana State Police is like a well-oiled machine in that they have a PIO his name is Detective Galvez, and he is the head of all of the PIOs in all of the counties. And he was actually really kind to me, and he called me back and said, I just want you to know that each detective is responsible for whatever they release to the media. And I was like, well, I don't really think of myself as the media, but all right, fine. I happen to really like the detectives who have Tom Biedenharn's case. One may have been on the job, I think, like 13 years, and the other is a more veteran officer, Detective Baxter. And they're both accomplished, and they have a different way of investigating. And yet I think they have both really beat the bushes as far as Tom's case. And I know it must be really difficult to be, in the Indiana State Police right now with the Delphi case. It must be difficult because you can't possibly, know what everyone is thinking and feeling and saying about you. And it just gets worse and worse as time goes on. So I tried to be polite. I tried to be considerate of Supervisor Carter and of the PIOs and of the detectives because they're the boots on the ground. And Tom's case is a weird one also, that they thought was related to the Stevenson case, and they thought was related to X and Y. And I don't think that they're related, but it's just, some cases are just so difficult. You work with what you have, and it's just not a lot. So when you contacted me about Tom's case, I would never say, please, don't cover that case, because I think any light shown on a case is a great thing. But girl, it's a toughie.
Yeah.
It's a toughie.
Because there's so much that you had to kind of go through to just get a little bit into the case.
Little bit. It's hampered by the fact that the family is extraordinarily private and worried about their safety. Maybe for a good reason, maybe not. I don't believe what happened to Tom. I believe it's isolated, and I don't believe that they would come back in any sort of, retribution to harm anyone in the family, but they're absolutely entitled to feel the way they feel and to protect themselves. And then it's hampered by the fact that it's Indiana State Police who don't release anything. So I had to dig and poke and prod. And it took a couple months, and the detective we had a 2-hour conversation one night, and he said, I'm going to tell you this because I'm starting to trust you. And I'm like, starting? You know, 2 months later, have I not proven that I'm not going to, like tape all of our conversations and, play it in party rooms or something? I mean, for God's sake. But, I do feel honored and blessed that I have a relationship with certain members of law enforcement in certain parts of the country, that have been really great to me. It's not that way always. But the only thing I can think to say is, so many people in Indiana are just not going to give up, and they keep digging. And that's what cases like Delphi and Tom's case need, is people who just won't give up. It's so easy. There's always another case the next day, the next hour. It's so easy to let them fall by the wayside, or let someone, give up on a case or forget, maybe just even by accident. But I'm amazed at Indiana's citizen sleuths and what they do all the time. And that's what's needed.
Now, I know that, like you said, podcasts don't solve murders.
Right.
Don't solve crimes, just like YouTube channels don't either. But you're actually making a difference in what you've in a few cases that you've done. Okay. What do you suggest for us Delphiers? I don't know how else to call us, but
no, I think that's a great word. Yeah, I love Incognito Society. I just think that's such a great name. It's one of the reasons I emailed you back so quickly, is I was like, oh, what an amazing, name for her YouTube channel. It's a really great name. I think that the Delphiers, if you want to, it sounds like a musical group, but the Delphiers, I feel you're doing what you can do. You are questioning authority. You are questioning all of the 25 different agencies that are on this case. You are bringing up suspects and information, pieces of information, ideas. That's one of the things that I'm impatient, horribly impatient, which is, I think, another, besides being much more auditory, I'm not very visual. I much prefer to hear things than see things. I think I hear a lot more than I see. So YouTube is an enigma to me for that reason. But what I have seen when I have paid attention to certain true crime channels on YouTube is that if I dig through, it's like, I'm going to use this as a terrible analogy, but it's like digging through the pile of shit to find the piece of corn. I dig through a lot of the stuff that is superfluous and doesn't matter. And yet there will be a piece of corn. There'll be a gem. Someone will say something, that is like, I've never heard that before. That is a wonderful theory. That is, maybe it doesn't go anywhere, but someone should track that down. And people in Indiana seem to be so boots on the ground with that case. I mean, so many channels, they go to the bridge, they take video, they get drones, they, email or question people they think might be involved or might have an answer. It's really an amazing community. I will say that. Yeah.
Why is it that you won't cover the case?
Because everyone's covered it so well. And because I am not I'm not an expert on the case. I will be really honest. The first 2 years, and I think you and I spoke on the phone about this, the first 2 years it came out, I was like, oh my God, this will just be solved so quickly. It has to be. They have everything. They have everything right there. They have it all. What? How could it not? And I just let it go. And so many other people covered it so well. I just let it go. And then time went on and it didn't get solved. So more people, the more people that cover it, I think the more, I told you something that shocked you is that I have talked to people that are, in my mind, true crime fanatics. And they're like, what's the Delphi case? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Because I've never seen a bigger push to get the information out. Something that seems so ridiculous and senseless. It's like, well, there has to be a connection. They had to know. I don't know that. I don't know that the killer knew them. It could be random. Maybe it's not. But, it goes back to everyone wants this tied up. Everyone wants to know who did it, and we may never know why. But, right. Who did it, and make sure that there is some sort of retribution for what they did. They need to answer for what they did. And that's why I think people do terrible things like finger point at the families, at the victims, etc. And there may not be a connection at all.
Right.
At all.
Unfortunately, that happens with the Delphi case, and that's something that I won't allow on my channel.
Probably more than any other case, and I applaud that you don't. I mean, it has been, covered so many ways, and people who have so much more information than me, and I just every day think this'll, I don't want to say this is the day, but it's like it's going to be solved. It's going to be solved.
We all feel, I think deep down we all feel it will. It's just the waiting. Well, just like, was it Stevenson's case that was 9 years?
Well, yeah, and it's still not solved, but yeah, they, I think they're getting closer. Yeah, it's been 9 years. It was 2011. It'll be 10 years this year. Yep.
I don't want to be here 9 years talking about Delphi.
Girl, I get that. And I do have to say, there are so many advancements. I know there may or may not be DNA. There may or may not be signatures that can be fleshed out to find out who this is. But there are things that give me such hope, like Othram Labs, which is OTHRAM, in Houston, Texas. And it's a group of 20 brilliant, genetic genealogy nerds, scientists who only work on the most difficult cases where perhaps DNA is degraded or it's old. I mean, they've solved cases from the 1800s, going from bone marrow. They're amazing, amazeballs. And they, hardly a week or a month goes by without them solving something, an older case. They helped work on the one, I think it was Indiana, and I can't remember her name, a little girl named April.
Yep.
Yeah. So Othram Labs, and they're not alone. They don't work in a vacuum. They work in hand with other labs and with genetic genealogists like Barbara Ray Venter and, people that helped with the Golden State Killer. They work with a series of, they work with Parabon Labs, but they're a private lab, and they they only take cases from law enforcement. So, if there's a case that maybe doesn't have the funding behind it to pay for, getting it solved, they do GoFundMes. They, ask for private donations. They do what they can to get it done.
See, that's the thing. I think the I can't even talk now. YouTube community would just come up with the money if they would just somehow let us know that that's what was needed in the Delphi case. If that was needed, there would be GoFundMes all over the place. There would be donation nights all over the place.
You're
I
right.
mean, it would be crazy.
No, you're right. There would be more money than they would ever need to solve it. I have a couple theories, right or wrong. It's the Indiana State Police who hold information closer to the vest than any agency I've ever spoken to across the country. And that is my hand to God. It is the most difficult agency to crack open, and I don't get it, but I can't figure that one out. And that, I also think perhaps what they have isn't in their mind usable. Maybe the DNA isn't usable, but what I can tell you is that things change and things progress, and things like Othram Labs are there waiting. And the CEO of Othram Labs is one of my favorite humans on earth. His name is Dr. David Middleman, and he is funny and brilliant and passionate and committed to solving the worst cold cases. And he says, if you left any DNA, you are already caught. And that really brings me hope. It really brings me hope. Maybe what was left at Abby and Libby's scene may not yield anything at this moment, maybe because someone isn't, in a criminal database like CODIS. But I just can't help but think that at some point they're going to fuck up, or they left something and behind that, the theory of Locard, the French criminalist from the 1800s. Everywhere we go, we leave a piece of us there. And I believe that. I believe that with all my heart, that the Delphi case will be solved. It just is not in the timeline we want it to be, for sure.
You give me hope. You give us all hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I promised you that I would keep it to just an hour. There is a question on the screen if you'd like to answer. I think you might have, but it says, for Melissa, what are your best sources for information? Do you go to the police and ask, or research media? You kind of answered that, but...
Oh, that's actually a great question. I was told when I first started by another podcaster, the thing that she uses the most is newspapers.com. And at first I thought, well, that's just some fucking bullshit. I have Google, right? And newspapers.com is not cheap. It's not expensive, but I guess it's about $150 a year. It's like $75 every 6 months or something. But it has newspapers back to the 1700s. And I know, it's like, they have Ben Franklin's penny saver or whatever. Like, they have every newspaper, printed on papyrus or something. And it's pretty interesting. And you find all sorts of pieces of information. I have nothing but gratitude to the journalists of the past, because they cover things in a way that is not like they're covered today. Today, journalism is a lot of opinion, whereas journalists of the past, it was fact. You couldn't put it in your newspaper if it didn't have, you didn't do your due diligence and it wasn't backed up with a whole lot of sources. So, right. Yeah. And, I am fascinated with newspapers.com, not only just for researching cases, but for other stuff too. It's fascinating. But yes, the other answer is, I do interview family members, but family members are people too, and they may not want to talk about the case. It brings them right back to the terrible thing that happened in their family. I have heard that more than once. I have most success interviewing law enforcement because they have a pat script, most of them, and some of them go off of the script, and those are the ones that are the most interesting and meaningful to me. But before I can ask them questions, I need to know the details of the case. So, there's things like public records requests and FOIA requests. And I will be honest with you, I am shocked at the states that do not honor them and shocked at the states that do. Nothing in India. God bless you, Indianans, because it's difficult to get anything out of anyone. And like I said, except the medical examiners who have been nothing but amazing to me. But yeah, if you can find a case where someone somewhere will say, yeah, I'll give you those records. Yeah, I'll give you. I am so blessed. I've gotten so many files that I shouldn't have access to that make me feel so humbled and honored. But it also helps me to ask the right questions to law enforcement, so that we get the information out, so that someone who hears it, someone somewhere who hears it may think, oh, I remember that. That guy did this, or that woman said this. It all comes down to human relationships, and human beings talk and say things. And sometimes people hear it and pay attention, and sometimes they don't. But yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for answering that. And
absolutely.
I, if you don't mind, I'm going to share your little clip with WKRC after you go.
Sure.
about Tom.
Absolutely.
And his case is, before you go, and again, I want to say thank you for taking the time.
It was, thank you for asking me. It was my pleasure, my honor.
Well, I know we're running over just a little bit here. Is there anything that you'd like to wrap up that you wanted to say, but you didn't get a chance to?
I can't think of anything because you asked such great questions, and I feel like I just kind of blabbered on and didn't give you a chance to ask a lot of questions and talk. But I would just say keep doing what you're doing, and your society keep doing what they're doing, because it just takes people paying attention, and it just takes people yelling maybe over top of the crowd and saying, please look at this case. Please don't let this case fall by the wayside. Please, because somebody somewhere knows something. I feel like that's in most every case. Somebody somewhere knows. It's just finding the correct ears or the correct eyes, to see it or hear it. Yeah. I think what you're doing is amazing and wonderful, and what a great community.
Well, thank you. I know that there's so many here listening right now that you've just enlightened them on so many levels, because sometimes we need that outside person and just smack us around a little bit. Right? And I felt like you were needed.
Well,
Okay.
I don't think you needed any smacking around, but I am honored to talk to you and your society and listen to you. Also, it's a lovely thing. I feel very blessed. So,
Well, you are welcome to come back anytime. I know
would
you
love
hate
to.
YouTube. Come back.
I don't hate it. I just don't understand it. You kids and your rock and roll and your YouTubey.
Well, if you have not checked out Melissa, if you don't know about this podcast, make sure you look up Just the Tip-Sters podcast. You will not regret it. She has a ton of podcasts out there on many different cases. So again, I say thank you, and tell your husband thank you so much.
It is my pleasure. And Elizabeth is talking about the fact that my husband is my producer, and I'm not even sure how we're talking. So he had to rig this up so I could even talk to you. I'd be using in the corner using an abacus trying to talk to you. So.
And I'm like, trust me, it's simple. If I can do it, you could do it.
And I'm like, no, I can't, girl.
You did great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, enjoy your dinner and your night.
Yes, thank you. And I look forward to talking to you again for sure.
Yes, stay in touch, okay?
Absolutely. You can't get rid of me now.
Heck no. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Elizabeth, the host of Incognito Society, for allowing us to come on to her YouTube channel. It was such a wonderful experience, and I look forward to talking to her about other cases, and I know we will. And we are so grateful to you, Tipsters. We hope you have a wonderful new year. Please feel free to contact us via email at jttipsters@gmail.com. If you would not mind taking some time to rate, or even a little more time to review us on Apple Podcasts, we would also be grateful. If you could subscribe to the podcast, that would be great. And you can call us at 832-847-7837 anytime with our Tipster hotline and more cowbell.
Remember, if you'd like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters. See you next week as Melissa kicks off Season 4.